Hello everyone, and welcome to a new series where we take an in-depth look at items from the famed Thomas Wooden Railway merchandise line. With over 30 years of characters, destinations, sets, promotional items, and reading materials, we're going to be here a while, so let's kick back and talk some Thomas Wooden Railway. It only makes sense to start things off with a look at the engine who started it all. He's the namesake of the franchise and this wooden railway system we all adore. Yep, it's Thomas the Tank Engine. Now I'm guessing most of us know who Thomas is, but if you need a refresher, he's the #1 blue engine on the island of Sodor. Sir Topham Hatt considers him to be a really useful engine, and his personality bounces between cheeky and fussy. But over anything else, he's always eager to help. Thomas is the star of the Railway series, the TV show, and of course, the Thomas Wooden Railway merchandise line. Because of this, he has the most default variants of any character, and a plethora of special designs, the latter being topics for another video. So in this one, we're going to discuss all of the normal Thomases that were released, and see how they compare with one another. The first version of Wooden Thomas that was sold to the public looked something like this. At the time, Learning Curve was assembling toys for the newly created Thomas Wooden Railway system in the United States, so each model that came off of the assembly line was unique. You could argue every Thomas from this era was one of a kind. However, there are a few consistencies I should point out. Thomas's funnel and dome were flat on the top, he was fitted with flat magnets, his chassis contained staples underneath, his wheels were thin and blank on the inside, and the color of his cab's roof was somewhat transparent. The paint looks faded in comparison to today's toys, but was passable at the time. Fortunately, the quality greatly improved with later generations. And one of my favorite insights, you can clearly see the different pieces of wood that were assembled together to create Thomas. Again, that's not everything that was unique to this early 90s Thomas, but those are some of the major uniformities. The next round of changes happened in 1994 when production shifted to China, and Thomas and his friends started to be pumped out of the factory looking like exact clones of one another. In this version, Thomas's funnel and dome are more rounded, the staples are gone from his underside, all of the wheels are now dated, and his roof is fully painted. For the rest of the 90s, Thomas underwent minimal changes to his overall design, including the removal of flat magnets, the addition of thicker wheels, and a slightly different expression. This version from 1998 is one of my favorites. It's the version of Thomas that I grew up with. Obviously, the plastic smokebox in later revisions provided more detail, but I'll always be a fan of a pristine wood funnel. By the turn of the millennium, Thomas looks something like this. Wow, we've come a long way, baby, and we've still got a lot of track to cover. In 2002, Thomas got his biggest redesign yet. He received a bigger face with a new expression and a larger body. This overhaul coincided with the rest of the main cast getting similar upgrades as well. I've always been mixed on this face. Nowadays, it's iconic because we stared at it for so long, but I think there are better Thomas expressions out there. One last minor change a year or so later added red stripes to Thomas's boiler, and this version of Thomas may be one of the most mass-produced toys ever. This Thomas was everywhere for years. This is how he looked for nearly a decade. I think we all have a few 2003 Thomases hiding in the couch cushions somewhere. However, by 2010, the Thomas and Friends TV series had changed significantly, and Thomas went from a high-quality scale locomotive to a computer-generated engine on screen. This transformation was a big one, and all of the merchandise at the time gradually began to reflect Thomas's new look. It took Learning Curve a few years to finally update Thomas, but when they did, yeah, this 2011 Thomas is not a looker. It contains the same body from his previous incarnation, but that CGI face, only Sir Topham Hatt could love that. I definitely appreciate learning curve trying to update Thomas to stay with the times, but this expression should have stayed on the drawing board. Fortunately, we got the CGI Thomas of our dreams when Fisher-Price took over the Wooden Railway license in 2013. This is another version of Thomas the Tank Engine that simply stuns every time I look at it. Fisher-Price really nailed the face, as they did with all of Thomas's other friends that got upgrades. As the years passed, some minor changes occurred, most notably the removal of the glossy finish on the paint, but Thomas looked this way through 2016. Surprisingly, the next year, Thomas and other select engines received new, smaller faces. I know these faces have their fans, but I was never one of them. The old expression was much better. And then 2018. Thomas Wooden Railway was rebranded to Thomas Wood, and suddenly we were getting half-painted engines. Definitely one of the design choices of all time, but fortunately this didn't last very long, as in 2019, the paint was restored and small engines like Thomas don't look too bad, all things considered. One of my favorite additions from this era was the engraving of names on the bottom of the chassis, rather than simply printing them on. Still, we were pretty far away from the heyday of the 90s and mid-2000s. However, in a striking reversal, Thomas Wooden Railway was resurrected in 2022, and with it came brand new designs unlike anything we'd ever seen before. Thomas has a totally different default face. He's a little bit longer and stockier, with eye-catching wheels and detailing I never thought would ever make its way to Thomas Wooden Railway. One of the few downsides would be that his funnel, dome, and cab have been squashed to make way for a more streamlined experience, but you could argue it helps him look more like the E2 that he's based on. I can critique this model all I want, but honestly, I'm just glad we have a high-quality wooden version of Thomas. It's definitely a departure from Thomases of the past, but I can appreciate the evolution. The journey hasn't always been easy, but Thomas is in really good shape as he approaches 3.5 decades in wooden form. Now, there are dozens and dozens of special versions of Thomas that only add to his arsenal of crazy designs, but those are worthy of their own special videos. As fun as it is to see Thomas dressed up for a wacky adventure, I love coming back to the simplicity of a regular Thomas, one without all the glitz and glamour and paraphernalia. Comparing an early 90s Thomas to the 2022 version is a bit of a shock. There's obviously a lot that's different, but there's still quite a number of similarities. And when you consider that 30 years have passed between these two toys, it's honestly surprising that there aren't more differences between them. Still, I'm just glad that we have a Wooden Railway Thomas around to create stories and go on amazing adventures with. I know there are so many to choose from, but let me know which Thomas is your favorite in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and thanks for talking some Thomas Wooden Railway.